Hey there everybody, Rain Lionheart here. Lately, within the circles and company that I keep online, something that's been coming up time and time again is talking about how to create a great story. How do you do it? What goes into it? How can I get better? Why is my writing garbage? What can my writing be? How can I make it be that way? These are all questions that I'm going to answer in a lecture-style video series that will equip you with the tools necessary in order to make you a more confident, stronger, and better creative writer, and above all, show you how great stories are crafted and give you a window as to behind the scenes of what really goes on when you watch a movie, when you watch a TV show, when you play video games. I've actually given this lecture before as a guest speaker at the college I graduated from, and I was able to educate students who once sat in my seat and help them get on the right track and get the right footing needed so they can become well-written writers, or I should say better well-written writers than what they currently are, and I hope to be able to do that for you guys as well. And before anyone asks, I've been writing and creative writing for about 15 years or so now. I've been doing this for quite a long time. I've submitted many short stories to many publications, such as The New Yorker, for example, and I even created a manga, and I uploaded it on Webtoon called D-Link. It has nearly 3,000 views, 31 followers, and a 10-star rating, or at least it did at one time. I'm sure those views have probably deteriorated by now because I stopped uploading, but that's an entirely different video as to why, but that's not what we're here for. I want to explain that I write for entertainment. I'm an entertainment writer, so I write for video games, movies, novellas, and as the end result, while yes, screenwriting is a whole art form on its own, I'm doing things in a way that any author, any writer, any creator, no matter what medium you write for, would do. This information applies to everything, especially if you're writing role-playing games or RPGs, and with such a deep story and with such deep story arcs and mechanics. So if I end up making references, I suggest probably Googling it, looking it up on YouTube, or writing it down in the comments below so that I can cover it in the next video. That being said, before we get into the elements of storytelling and all the different subjects that we're going to have to cover, which will all be its own individual video, I want to discuss real writer syndrome. I recently wrote an article on this, and I explained that a lot of up-and-coming writers, a lot of new writers especially, suffer from real writer syndrome. And a lot of this stems from the fact that they're comparing themselves to people who have already made it without understanding how they made it. Let me explain. So, social media and society believes that everyone is an expert, when it's the nuance. The nuance is what matters, and that makes someone an expert or an authority if they can understand and articulate said nuance. People say a real writer would blank. A real writer wouldn't blank. Here's the thing. When people do that, when young and up-and-coming writers do that, especially since creative writing currently is such a big thing and it's finally getting its flowers that it deserves, for such a long time, it's kind of been, yeah, it's a cool hobby. Oh, yeah, that's cool. You know, they're a creative writer. They're an author. But now, finally, everyone is starting to really dive into this hobby, this career path, this niche topic. Everyone is really starting to try and get in on the creative writing craze. And you would see people on social media or on LinkedIn or on Reddit or on Twitter or wherever you decide to get your news, and they'll say things like, this is what a real writer would do. This is what a real writer doesn't do. Here's a better way to do that. This is all nonsense. This is ridiculous. And I'll tell you why. So when we look at writers like J.K. Rowling, she only got lucky because, that's the first thing, right? She got lucky. But she only got lucky because when she submitted her book to Bloomsbury, the chairman of publications, his daughter, loved the book so much because it's a children's book. She went to her father and said, "Can this be published? I really want to have this book." Of course he's going to do anything for daddy's little girl. When we look at Tom Clancy, the only reason why he was able to write what he did is because he had somebody at the Pentagon leaking information, which, by the way, is a national security risk, but, that's okay. I'm just saying. He had somebody at the Pentagon giving him information so he could write his spy and military thriller novels. I was going to say books, but I don't know. So anyways, you get what I'm trying to say here? If we look at C.J. Box, C.J. Box was a nobody. Well, he wasn't really a nobody, but he wasn't mainstream. It wasn't until Paramount decided to pick up his Joe Pickett series, and suddenly everybody knows who Joe Pickett is. If we look at, what's his name? The guy who wrote The Witcher, I think it's Andrzej Sapkowski? Yeah, Andrzej Sapkowski. I believe I'm saying that correctly. So he was big in Poland, but it wasn't until CD Projekt Red adapted his series into a video game that was then sold over into the West. So you really have to understand, when real writers, in quotation marks, become successful or when they do certain things, it's because they had the backing of a multi-million-dollar industry behind them. They had someone or something to put their work on a platform that gave them the exposure that they needed. Now, I will say, even if you had terrible writing, simply just because you have the platform does not mean you will become successful in the long term. Eventually, people will see that your writing is garbage and that your writing is terrible. So to avoid that, you want to have the best skills possible when it comes to creative writing, and you want to do the best that you can so that if and when or in the event you do get that platform, you do get that multi-million-dollar studio backing, then you have grounds to say, I have skill, I have talent, etc. That's not to say that you don't currently. It's not to say that you'll never make it. That's not to say that you can't creatively write. You can't write, fiction or science fiction or romance or historical, whatever you want to do, Western, medieval, fantasy, sci-fi. It doesn't matter, because when you compare yourself to, these guys did it. Well, yeah, but these guys, you can't see them doing air quotes, they had such a huge backing behind them. Of course, it's going to look amazing. We don't have that. At least not yet. If you want to have that, you go to a publisher or you wait until somebody comes to you because you got popular and big enough, and then they say, we want to take something that you made and turn it into some type of adaptation, whether that be a television show, a movie, a Netflix series, a video game franchise. But it all starts here, at character and narrative design. So, let's walk through it. So when we look at the art of storytelling, there is a lot to cover. There are so many different subjects that we have to go through in order to really understand what makes a great story a great story. There's a phrase in the video game industry, and it goes a little something like this. There's no such thing as the perfect pitch until the game is signed and making money. What does that mean? That means that every idea is just an idea. It's not until that idea is in contract and the game starts making money does everybody give it a standing ovation and round of applause, because originally it was just an idea. You have to get a yes. The same thing applies here. When we look at the art of storytelling, these are all concepts. These are all the different elements that we use when it comes to storytelling and the different ways that we go about it. If you really want to do well and get people to give you that standing ovation and to give you that round of applause, you need to be able to not only master these, but understand exactly why each and every single one of these sections, which again will be its own video, are important. And not just important, but crucial and critical to what you are trying to write and why. So we have motifs, thematics and theme, also known as the message. We have inspiration and aesthetic, mood and atmosphere. We have world. When we get there, I'll tell you. Well, I was gonna, you know what? I might as well say it now. Whatever. I'll say it now. So the reason why I put mood and atmosphere for inspiration and aesthetic is because that is what you're going to be relying on when you talk about the world, when you talk about the items, the objects, the type of textures, when you use onomatopoeia, when you use, which are like sound effects that are written, when you use descriptions in order to talk about your world. You really want to describe the mood and the atmosphere to match not just the scene, which is a given, but just the general world. So, for example, the way you describe grass in a fantasy setting would not be the same way you would describe grass in a Civil War setting, because you really want to give two different pictures. So that's why I put mood and atmosphere. Anyways, we have world creation and lore development, we have character creation and world immersion, explanation versus justification, antagonist and protagonist philosophy, story dynamics, dialogue and interaction, show not tell. However, you can always tell but never show, and then that keeps people coming back because they want to know more about what you're talking about. And then you also have objectivity versus experience. You have interconnection at play, or interconnection and larger play. And then you have weaving the story and narrative flow. Each of these are its own individual subjects. They're going to be its own individual video. But we're going to start at the top and go to 1.1, like a Mario world, if you want to think about it like that. 1.1, motifs, thematics, and theme, also known as the message. Quick disclaimer. The formula will change based on the final presentation of your work. The way that you write for different styles of entertainment will be different for others. This is a general comprehensive course on storytelling, character, and narrative design, so don't think that just because you're writing a historical fiction, a western, medieval, fantasy, sci-fi story, maybe you're writing romance novel, or maybe you're writing something like isekai? Yeah, pretty sure I'm saying that correctly. Yes, isekai. You can write whatever type of story you want, even if it's a crime thriller like Toshiro Nagoshi, how he wrote the Yakuza franchise, and you have Al Pacino here from Scarface. It doesn't really matter what genre you're writing. This is all it will all funnel into it. You just have to apply the things that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, you have to apply the things that are necessary to what makes that genre strong, but also use the other elements for foundational purposes as well. So let's talk about motifs, thematics, and theme, also known as the message. So let's get right into that. So when we look at motifs, thematics, and theme, also known as the message, really what we're asking is, what is it that you want to tell your audience? What is it that you're trying to describe? What is it that you're trying to say? What is the message you want to give? The word theme, at least how I was taught, theme is Latin for the word message. So if you were to put theme, Theme, you could draw a line and then write essage at the end. Theme is Latin for the message, because theme is a reoccurring thing that keeps happening, or something that is supposed to be the main point of something, right? And when we look at what some of the motifs, thematics, and theme are for many of these different video games, because again, I write for video games, but again, you could apply this to novels, novellas, TV shows, movies, but of course, because I write for video games, I'm using them as an example here. Motifs, thematics, and theme, you want to ask yourself, what is it I'm trying to tell the audience? What is it that I'm trying to explain? What is it that I want to tell my readers, my viewers, my players, my audience? What is it I'm trying to play? Or what is it I'm trying to say? I mean, I guess what am I trying to play as well? Because like if you have some games that, you know, really test the player about like their moral limits, for example, but that's like a whole different conversation. So anyways, when we look at games like Yakuza 0, Fallout 4, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, Saints Row, we have to really understand what they're trying to say. What are motifs, what are thematics, and what is the theme? Well, we covered theme. Theme is the message, right? It's what you're trying to tell your audience. But what about motifs and thematics? So motifs are they can be anything from words, symbols, colors, phrases, inanimate objects. It's just a type of symbolism. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a flashlight, it could be a telephone, it could be a mug full of apple cider, like what I have currently. It could be a pocket watch. It could be a type of book. It doesn't necessarily matter what object. It doesn't even have to be an object. It could be a color, it could be a phrase, it could be when somebody smiles. If we look at The Godfather, every time someone dies in the movie, there's an orange in the scene, or there's the color of orange in the scene. Why is that? Because in the very beginning of the movie, Don Corleone, when he's nearly assassinated at the fruit stall, I believe it's in Brooklyn, New York, he spills over a bunch of orange crates, and that's to represent all the deaths that's going to happen in The Godfather. And what happens? There's a mob war that breaks out, and everybody's getting killed. So we use motifs to symbolize our theme, our message. That's what we use motifs for. And you don't have to really hammer it home. A lot of JRPGs do that, but that's because they really reinforce the idea of what it is that they're trying to say and why, because it matters on such a dramatic scale. Also, we have to kind of, and I want to pick and choose my words carefully here. We kind of have to also realize that when we look at JRPGs, Japanese role-playing games, or when we look at the old Saints Row, for example, so there's the phrase like telenovela, which are like the Spanish soap operas, right? Spanish soap operas. And then you have melodramas, and that's kind of what like K-dramas, J-dramas are. That's what Japanese video games are. They're melodramas. And then I guess Saints Row is kind of a bit of a melodrama in some respect. That being said, because they are melodramas and because they are kind of a more heavier, dramatic, theatrical style, I don't want to use the word play because then my film director is like coming out, but because the screenplay is very dramatic, they really hit home those motifs and those thematics. But that's not the point. So when we look at games like Yakuza or Fallout or Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, Saints Row, when we look at the motifs, there's always going to be something in each of those that kind of really tells you what the game is about and why it's important. So Saints Row, for example, the motif that keeps coming up is loyalty. And when we look at the message of Saints Row, which really has, and Saints Row is actually a really interesting concept for a variety of reasons, because it took Providence, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey, and it kind of put that tri-state / bi-state area, and they named it the city Stillwater, which is from Stillwater, New Jersey. But anyways, that's not the point. I believe Stillwater's from Stillwater, New Jersey. That being said, is the motif here is loyalty. It's all about proving yourself. It's all about showing, I belong to be here. I will have your back. I will do this job for you. I will do this. I will do that. I will show my reason to be within the ranks of the Saints. But also because Saints Row is also about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire told in a gang war setting, which is absolutely phenomenal, but that's not the point. The point here is, the message of Saints Row is loyalty can and will get you killed. If you've played Saints Row 1, you were left for dead by Julius Little. And so you did everything in your power to show your loyalty to him because he saved you from being killed, only for him to turn his back on you and try to kill you too, which sets the events for Saints Row 2. But of course it also poses the other question, what's the point of violence? What is the point? Nobody wins in the end. Solving violence with violence leads to nothing. Everybody at the end of Saints Row 1, technically speaking, they did not need to make another Saints Row game. Technically speaking, they could have just left it there. The Saints dissolve at the end of the game. The Vice Kings are gone. The High Street Rollers are gone. I believe they're called the High Street Rollers. There's the Rollers, Vice Kings, and then there's the Triad. So all these gangs are destroyed, including the Saints. So what was the violence for? Originally, they were, and plus they're not really even a street. I mean, they are a street gang, but they're really vigilantes. But that's not the point, because then we're getting into the technicalities of it all. But long story short is the point here is violence leads to nothing. So all these gangs kill each other, they destroy each other, and the city is left with nothing. And the gangs are left with nothing. What was the point? What was the reason? Violence leads to violence. Violence leads to nothing. When we look at Final Fantasy 15, it's very Final Fantasy 13-esque, and of course that's because Final Fantasy 15 was supposed to be the new Final Fantasy 7 after they talked about how Final Fantasy 15 was originally supposed to be Final Fantasy 13 versus, or Final Fantasy versus 2. Final Fantasy 13 versus 2. That being said, it's very Final Fantasy 13 in nature, which is sacrifice the few to save the many. And we know this because that is something that comes up in the game near the end, but we also kind of learn what it means to have brotherhood, and what it means to have family, and what it means to spend moments with people that you truly love the most. When we look at Kingdom Hearts, it's light over darkness, the power of friendship, the power of hearts, good versus evil, light versus darkness, how there cannot be darkness without light, but there cannot be light without darkness. And so we have this yin-yang and this balance of everything must be holistic and balanced, but at the same time, what happens when those scales are tipped too far in one direction or the other? Of course, we also have to talk about the word heart in Kingdom Hearts. So, for those of you who don't know, hi, Editing Rain here. Sorry to ruin the continuity of the video. I just wanted to mention that I go on to talk about the symbolism and motifs within Kingdom Hearts and how important and integral that is to the main story. And while I regret not keeping this in the video, it really does deserve its own topic of discussion and video itself. What you need to know is that in April of 1998, specifically April 22nd of 1998, coinciding with Earth Day at the time, Disney released their Animal Kingdom theme park, and I'll explain why that's important. But I just wanted to cut a lot of that out and explain, like, hey, there's a reason why I'm talking about this. Disney had recently released or debuted their newest attraction to their Disney theme park called Animal Kingdom. When a Disney Interactive executive was in the elevator with Tetsuya Nomura, and they happened to be going to the same floor, and Tetsuya Nomura said, let's have Donald Duck, fight Cloud from Final Fantasy. And they got into the room, they started talking about the idea. One of the things that came up was Disney said, well, because we just released this theme park called Animal Kingdom, and because Donald, Goofy, and Mickey and everybody's an anthropomorphic animal, we want the word kingdom to be in the name of the title of the game. Square Enix wanted to talk about the discussion of the word heart. Why? So in Japanese culture, a heart isn't just an organ. In Japanese culture and philosophy, the heart is the literal soul of a human being. It is the core of a person. It is what makes you, you. It is your identity. It is who you are. In fact, it was actually the inspiration for D-Link, my manga, but instead of talking about hearts, I talk about memories and how experiences shape who you are and what happens when some of those are let go, or what happens when some of those are broken, what happens when some of those are kept for too long, etc. That being said, when it comes to Kingdom Hearts, Square Enix really wanted to dive into what is a heart, what is an identity, what is a nobody, what is a person, what does it mean to be? And they talked about this Japanese philosophy, and so they combined Kingdom and Hearts, and they put together Kingdom Hearts. So that's why in the game, or in the games I should say, motifs, thematics, and theme, the message, the motif here for Kingdom Hearts is what is a heart. Heart this, heart that, light this, darkness that. It just keeps coming up over and over and over again. The theme, obviously, what does it mean to be somebody? What does it mean to have a heart? What does it mean for what does darkness mean? What does it mean to have darkness? What does it mean for light? What does light mean? What does it mean to have light? Final Fantasy 15 is the same exact thing, except it's about what does it mean to have duty and honor and sacrifice, and what does it mean to give yourself up to save your friends who are your family, your brotherhood, right? In Fallout 4, it's you can't cheat time. At the end of the game, Nate or Nora, depending on who you play as, they and at least I can speak from Nate's perspective because I played as the male. So Nate, at the end of the game, he says, I thought I could like run it back. I thought I could cheat time. He doesn't actually say run it back, but he says, like, I thought I could run around. I thought I could cheat time. I thought I could get back all the years that I lost with my son, but I couldn't. So when we look at Fallout, the motif throughout the game is not just, oh, I'm looking for my son, just like how in Fallout 3 it's I'm looking for my dad, but in Fallout 4 it's there's so much time that I lost, and I'm fighting every single day, and all of that time that I'm fighting to get to somebody that I believe could still be alive is worth it. But I'm hoping that if I just continue to keep fighting, then maybe, just maybe, I can get that time back. But of course we know the answer is you can't cheat time. When we look at Yakuza 0, that entire prequel to the Yakuza franchise, the entire mantra of that game is find yourself and do what's right. I could sit here for hours talking about how motifs, thematics, and theme are really the core of any story. And if you want to be a good creative writer, you need to think of something that is not only meaningful, but something that is meaningful to you, something that is going to get your audience to have higher thinking, something that's going to make your audience really dive into what is X, Y, and Z. Why should ABC matter? Why does, I don't know, WRM, whatever variables you want to put in, why does that matter? What is it that really resonates with me as a reader, and because you're writing the story, an author. But anyways, in the case of Yakuza 0, when we look at Kiryu, so his whole thing was, I don't care if I get kicked out of the Yakuza or not. Well, I mean, he does to some extent, but it's about doing what's right. It's about proving I did not commit this crime. I did not kill anybody. I was framed. I did not do these things to the people you said I did. This is not who I am. No one is going to tell me who, what, where, why, and how I am in my life and my future and what it means to be a Yakuza. I get to determine my fate and my destiny, and I'm going to do what's right, and I'm going to stop people from choosing that for me. Of course, that's like the generic overall arcing umbrella. Specifically, it's about finding, instead of just being this grunt in the Yakuza, learning what it means to weigh who you're loyal to versus what is right, and then having to balance those scales. When we look at Majima, Goro Majima, like Kiryu Kazuma, when we look at Majima was a prisoner and in servitude for a crime that his sworn brother committed, not that he did. But because he didn't tell the higher-ups at the Yakuza what his sworn brother, was going to do, he then had to take the punishment as well, because they said, well, you're just as guilty as he is, because you covered for him. When he gets the opportunity to get back into the Yakuza, which is the one thing he wants desperately, it comes at the cost of, you're going to have to kill somebody. Turns out, it's the girl he falls in love with, and he can't do it. So now he has to choose, do I want to kill this girl that I'm in love with, so I can get back into something that clearly disregarded me so easily when I gave them everything? Or do I save this girl and go against the very Yakuza family that swore they were going to give me the power, the recognition, they were going to wipe the slate clean, they were going to completely give me a second chance at the only life I've ever known? Which one is right? And ultimately he says, they're not worth it. The Yakuza is not worth it. I'm going to save the woman that I love, even if I can't tell her that because I'm too scared. and I agree with him on that. But but still, the point of the matter here is when you write a story, your job as the author is to take your motifs, your symbolism for your theme, which is your message, and you're to put that together in a way that is impactful for the audience. And there's many different ways that you can do that. There's many different ways. Especially if it's something that is personal or something that is sensory or something that is an idea that people tend to agree with, like, hurting animals is bad. So maybe you have a story in which there's a dead animal every time something happens, or every time someone is around, there is a dead animal. Like, so for example, I don't know if this idea just came to me or if I saw it from a movie. I may have seen it from a movie. There's a character where every time he's around, he drops like a dead cat or like a dead animal of some kind. And what it represents is not just to intimidate the protagonists, but also at the same time, it's a message of, I am death. I am here to kill the innocent. I am here to destroy purity, right? Like, animals are innocent creatures. So if you kill an animal, and then, not like you're hunting or anything, I mean like a malicious intent, and then you drop it, and then you go chasing after the protagonists, what does that say? It says, I'm here to take your purity. I'm here to take something that, of life, which is sacred. So you can have something that it doesn't have to be so extreme, but at the same time, you want to have something that is impactful. And with Yakuza, everybody has gone through the, I have to choose what is right for me versus what is expected of me. Everyone's gone through that phase in life, and a lot of people, especially ages 14 to 33 in the current year, actually in the current decade, has had to go through that. And then when we look at Fallout 4, we've all had those moments of taking things for granted or just trying to do something because of how much it means to us. And we're hoping that if we could just stick around a little longer, maybe, just maybe, we could get back time that we've lost. I'm sure there's many people who have had family members who are dying, and you're thinking, well, it's not too late. I can still do X, Y, and Z, and I can make up all this time, etc., and it doesn't happen. When we look at Kingdom Hearts, everybody's had fallouts with friends. Everybody has seen their friends turn into jealous, angry, and honestly envious people with blackened or darkened hearts, or as Kingdom Hearts says, heartless people, meaning they don't have a heart. And they could become one of the worst people on the planet. We've seen what the power of friendship can do. We've seen what the power of light can do. We understand what it means to be somebody, what it means to have identity, what it means to have friends, what it means to have love and belonging. We know what it means to be somebody that has a purpose. These are all things that Kingdom Hearts talks about in a philosophical sense. When we look at Final Fantasy 15, we all know that whole story of people, and it could be anybody, a fireman, it could be a cop, so it could be a fireman, it could be a cop, it could be an EMT, it could be a teacher, it could be anybody who gives their life to defend others because they love them so much, and that is their duty. I had a friend who works at Walmart, and there was a mentor that worked there, and that was a real father figure for him. Unfortunately, there was a shooting at this Walmart, and that mentor took a bullet. And he did it out of bravery, he did it out of sacrifice, he did it out of compassion and love. And we can all relate to what it means to be very close to somebody who then is taken from us, and someone that we absolutely adore, and someone that we absolutely love and cherish, and then when the moment comes, it is a knife to the chest. Not the gut, the chest. And it sucks. When we look at ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔯𝔤𝔤, I mean, maybe some people can relate to this, but I certainly can. I know what it's like to be loyal to the wrong people. I know what it's like to be loyal to people who initially did the right thing, but then became corrupted by the end. I know what it's like to serve somebody and say, I have your back through and through. I have your back 110%. Only for them to betray me in the end. Loyalty can and will get you killed. So it could be something personal, it could be something symbolic, it could be something philosophical, it could be something that is literal, it could be something that is opaque in nature, and what I mean by that is something like for example, maybe your message is like, love is where you find it. It's not about seeking it. It's where you find it. That's a very opaque style message. There's not, it's kind of like Hallmark movies, for example. Those are very opaque. But that in and of itself is still a message. So it doesn't matter if it's something like opaque or not. It could genuinely be something that is a little more dark and serious. But of course, as a drama writer, I write things and I watch things and I play things that have some edge and some grit to it, such as Yakuza, Fallout, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔯𝔤𝔤𝔤. But we do have to talk about black motifs and shadow motifs. You may have heard this before, and if you haven't, Red Dead Redemption is a great way to experience this. So a black motif is also called a shadow motif, is a type of reoccurring or common message throughout the narrative. Think the strange man from Red Dead Redemption, which, by the way, is the devil, according to Dan Houser. Who talks to John Marston about his life and his actions and the things that he's done, and kind of tells him, John, we're getting real close, and I think you and I are gonna spend a lot of time together. And John's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And which is funny because he comes from hell, so he's going to hell for his actions, but that's not the point. The point here is that if you look at Red Dead Redemption, they take reoccurring and a common message throughout the narrative as it would be a normal motif. However, the shadow motif tells the opposite of the pre-existing motif to give a greater overall picture. I know it sounds like a paradox, but for example, in Red Dead Redemption, the motif here is, it's never too late to redeem yourself from your past. That's the motif, right? Arthur, you don't have to do this. Oh, Arthur, you're such a good man. Oh, please, Arthur, I could never do this. I could never ask this of you. Or if you look at John, John's like, I'm just trying to clean up my past so I can live with my family, right? And then when he goes and he hunts down the old gang members that he used to run with, he always says, it's nothing personal, friend. I'm just trying to be safe with my family. We all saw this coming, this, that, and the other. And he's making up for the sins of the past, right? But the shadow motif is for some. So really, what is the message of Red Dead Redemption? Well, the message of Red Dead Redemption is, it's never too late to redeem yourself from your past. For some. Not everybody gets that. Not everybody gets that. When we look at the canonical ending, if you want to, there's no real, I guess the canonical ending for Red Dead Redemption 2 is Arthur dies on top of the mountaintop watching the sunrise in his high honor, in the high honor state. But it could also be the low honor state as well. I think both work out just fine. However, I think canonically, because the game is called Red Dead Redemption, you're supposed to redeem yourself, so you die at high honor, which is what makes it more impactful. And when you see John and Arthur both die, it's just a gut punch back to back. And I think what's really interesting is when you're a creative writer, you can have a shadow. You don't have to, but if you want that catch-22, if you want that double-edged sword, it makes your story a hell of a lot more visceral, and it makes it a lot more emotionally attractive to an audience, and it makes it a lot more engaging, because what happens is at the end, you're sitting there stunned, and you're like, oh god. If you look at Cyberpunk 2077, when I played that game, I was like, I have no idea why this is special. I have no connection to Night City. This is absolutely nothing to me. But at the end of the game, when the credits rolled, after Johnny was trying to stop you in every which way from sacrificing yourself, at the end of it, I said, wow, I get it. I get what Night City is about. I get it. I get what Night City is about. I get why it's a place that's just absolutely, it just sucks. I get why Johnny was trying to stop you. I get why he got attached to you. I see what happens to people who get too sucked into this dystopian cyberpunk hellscape. I get it now. So the catch-22 for cyberpunk, I would think, is, life is how you make it and how you decide to make it. Enjoy it, because you might not always have it, especially if you have to give it up because somebody else is taking it. And that's a hard pill to swallow in a lot of cases. That is a hard pill to swallow. It really is. It's definitely a hard pill to swallow. So Red Dead Redemption has the same exact kind of mantra here. It's never too late to redeem yourself from your past, but for some, because John doesn't get to do that. Arthur did. So there's that catch-22. Again, this is more optional. You do not have to actually do this. No one's going to force you. No one's going to sit there and say, well, your story is garbage because you didn't add a shadow motif and I found it rather unflattering. No one's going to say that. But it will make a hell of a lot more difference if you add something that will ultimately give kind of a visceral edge to the message that you're trying to tell. Because again, if we go back, there we go. If we go back, we can look at some of the things here, and there's always kind of a catch-22. If you find yourself in Do What's Right, you may have to sacrifice what you currently have in the present, right? You can't cheat time. So maybe you want to be a little more caring with the time that you have and with what you're given, because it's sacred, right? It's a sacred thing. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Enjoy the people that you are around, because you might not always have them. The catch-22, because you might not always have them. They might not be there tomorrow. That is the catch-22, right? Loyalty can and will get you killed. Catch-22. Nobody wins in the end. Solving violence with violence leads to nothing. Catch-22. So what was it all for? What was the point? You rid the gangs of Stillwater. Congratulations. And at the end, you yourself were destroyed. If we look at Red Dead Redemption, the final mission of Red Dead Redemption is called "And Thou the Final Enemy Shall Be Destroyed." So we almost have some mirroring going on here with nobody wins in the end. What was it all for? We do kind of have some back-to-back there. So in my own work, Emerald Gardens, I talk about fate and destiny and how that is inescapable. This is the photo that I found on the internet, and I think it quite fit the character style. I think AI is a good tool. I think that AI should be used as a tool. But I do think we are also in a very rock and a hard place where a lot of people would prefer others not to use AI to create original characters for their work, and rather just hire an artist. And at the same time, they would say, oh, well, you could just find a photo off the internet. But then I do know that there is a small minority of people who would get really pissed and say, well, you took a photo off the internet, that's not really yours, that doesn't really work for you, etc. As long as you're not making money off it, I think that it's okay. But it's kind of a rock and a hard place, because I don't think that you should have to. I don't think that you should have to acquiesce, for a better word. I don't think that you should have to acquiesce to both spectrums. I don't think that you should have to bend a knee to those who say, don't take an image off the internet, don't use AI, hire an artist. I also don't think that you should fully use AI, because even though AI is great for originality, people will not take your work as seriously. If it's done right and it's done well and it's hard to tell if it's AI, you might be able to get away with it. But when people immediately hear that it's AI, they immediately tune out. So, it's kind of like, well, if you don't have money for an artist, you're screwed. So, I mean, it is what it is. But the point here is that this is the main protagonist here, Mr. Warwick Leon Riverbelt. And in his story of Emerald Gardens, I talk about fate and destiny and how that's inescapable. And so we'll talk about that here, because we can talk about that here. So when I talk about fate and destiny and how it's inescapable, I'm talking about how in this particular narrative and in this story, something that was supposed to happen no matter what is something that the main character, Warwick, is going to have to live with. I want to explore the topic of not just a sense of honor and duty and what it means to be an emperor, and how fate and destiny are inescapable, and that your calling is your calling no matter how much you try to avoid it, or no matter how much you feel as though you can't do it, or no matter how much you feel as though other people believe you're not worthy of it. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to tell the story of someone who understands that no matter what they do, they will always have to do something, because nobody else can do it but them. And that's important, because I think in our lives, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but in my life, and I think in a lot of other people's lives, I think we can all relate to a calling that we have. You're a musician, you're a chef, you're a baker, you're an artist, you're a painter, you make commentary videos on YouTube, you're an auto mechanic, you're a storyteller. We all have a calling and a passion. And so I want to explore, what is it like to be someone who has this calling and is attacked from every angle possible about being that calling, and then at the same time they themselves think that they're not worthy of it, or they need to prove that they are worthy of it, but prove it in a way that is more about social standing rather than action and doing. And then eventually learning, hey, it doesn't matter if this jackoff over here says that I can't do it. Hey, it doesn't matter if this person over here is upset with me that I'm not reaching the potential that I should be at the current moment. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it at my pace. I'm going to do it at my time. I'm going to do it in a way that shows I am worthy, but I'm not going to put that worthiness in the hands of the jack-off who says I can't do it, and the guy who's pissed off that I haven't reached X, Y, and Z yet, when literally I'm just getting started. And that's something that I want to explore. So, an example for Emerald Gardens. It has been 5 years now since the Somnus, the era in which people refer to when the Emperor was asleep for half a decade. In that time, the world of ℏ𝔢𝔢 has greatly shifted. Phelan is now Emperor, which is Warwick's brother, by the way, and had been for 5 years, and is taking duties of emperorship while his mother is the voice that talks to the people. She deals with the public, he deals with the larger game of chess. Wars have broken out between some of the 8 kingdoms, and political games have gotten increasingly out of control. And above all, in the center of Serenity Savannah, a gigantic crater has formed, and from it, a planet-sized glowing white, semi-transparent spiral staircase that leads to the sky, with a floating Gothic-style, all-white quartz pillar pearly gate, the gate to Emerald Gardens. The Emperor has awakened, and ℏ𝔢𝔢 is in chaos. While he regains his strength to set out on a destiny shown in the tarot cards long before his own life began, other stories begin. I'll get to that in a second. For now, we rejoice that Emperor Warwick Leon Riverbelt has awakened, and his destiny to set things right begins. So, let's break this down for a few things. First and foremost, when we talk about the motifs and the thematics and the theme, fate and destiny is inescapable, right? So we can look here. It says, while he regains his strength to set out on a journey shown in the tarot cards long before his own life began. So clearly, this was going to happen no matter what. Fate said, this is the life that you are going to have, and this is how it's going to happen. And then from there, you are going to make your own destiny out of it. And then, of course, they say other stories begin. That gives me breathing room to write other things outside of the main narrative. So in video games, and even in television shows, we see this a lot now. That wasn't always the case back in the day, but now it's a little more common, and if not, I'm not going to use the words traditional, but we see it happening now more than what we used to back in the day, so I'm going to use the word normalized. It's normalized now to have your mainline series, and then to have, I don't want to say spin-offs, but spin-offs. Like, you have spin-offs, or you have other branching arcs of stories that intersect with the main with the main storyline. So that gives me, as the author, breathing room to say, okay, I can write other things that happen. In this way, if there's any plot holes, or if there's any questions that should be answered as its own story, or if there's any characters that I want to explore, if there's a reason for me to dive into other aspects of the world and of the main narrative, but from another perspective, for example, or from another side story, that gives me reason to do so. And with this here, my whole point with this is, we talk about how the world is in chaos, how his brother is emperor, his mother's trying to calm the people down, some wars have broken out between some kingdoms, and he's just woken up after 5 years, has no idea what the hell's going on. I want to really dive into the discussion as the writer and creator of what it means to have a fate and destiny that's inescapable, why it's inescapable, and I'm not going to use the word man enough, but having the willpower and the strength to command destiny and chaos, or a better way, having the willpower and the strength to command chaos and control destiny within it. I think that's a better way of explaining it, and that's really what the story of Emerald Gardens is about. So when you think of something like a character, or when you think of something like a world, or when you think of something like a story, remember, you really want to have your motifs, thematics, and theme. You want to have something that is special to the narrative. And that can really just kind of be whatever that you choose, of course. In the next video, and I think that this is a good place to end it, in the next video, we're going to be talking about inspiration and aesthetic, also known as mood and atmosphere. What makes your world appealing and why? You can't just have a world and say that, oh, it's attractive, or oh, it's colorful, or oh, it's this, oh, it's that. You need to have, and it's not even a matter of just description, you need to really give the audience a reason as to why this world is exciting. What about Santo Aliso from Saints Row is exciting? What about Empire Bay from Mafia 2 is exciting? What about Rapture from BioShock, or Rhodes from Red Dead Redemption? Why are these things exciting? Why are they amazing? And we will talk about that in the next video. If you guys did enjoy this video lecture series, make sure to leave a comment. Also, make sure to like the video. If someone that you know is a creative writer and is struggling to get going, make sure you share this video as well. You can always save it if you want. Thank you all so much for watching. It really does mean a lot. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.